can't give everything away. Signora Ambasciatrice. Bella Housebass Annika inclined her head. The Assavean ambassador reciprocated with a nod of her own. It was probably a carefully calculated fraction less deferential than she had measured Annika's to be, but honestly the Sarkophan didn't notice or care. Let the Assaveans have their little dominance games. Mevrouw Ambassadeur. The Assavean was clearly pleased with herself. Her smile was self-satisfied, and she was practically vibrating with schadenfreude. She obviously felt that she had the upper hand. Annika savoured the moment. We have heard that your attempt to create a Free Seas Pact has sadly foundered. The ambassador couldn't contain her glee. It is always a mistake to put your trust in the Empire. They will always disappoint you. But do not worry. We will not hold against you things said in haste. They are already forgotten. Oh, I do hope not, said Annika. I would hope that you have not forgotten that I reminded you exactly who you are dealing with, madame. Confusion. The ambassadrice frowned. This was not going the way she had expected when she accepted Annika's invitation. She had been expecting an apology and came here with every intention of twisting the knife before magnanimously accepting it, and then using that apology to launch her own foray into renegotiating trade tariffs. I do not understand, she said. That is indeed clear, said Annika, but I did not call you here to talk about the Free Seas Pact, which, as you say, was fatally holed below the waterline. In fact, I asked you to attend me so that I could formally deliver the decision of the Betlar Housebass to the Assavean plenum. Please pay attention. I do not wish to repeat myself. She was overplaying it, she knew, but Annika very much disliked the Assavean ambassador, and given how complicated the next several months were going to be, she had decided to try and gain some pleasure where she could. How dare you? The ambassador stood. Sit down, barked Annika, and in spite of herself, the ambassador did so, more from the force of the words than any intent to obey. The Free Seas Pact is over, she said, calm again. So now we have no choice but to establish the Pax Sarkophan. The ambassadrice stiffened, eyes widening. She understood that the decision to use Old Assavean was not a coincidence. I've had the formal document created, but I wanted to tell you directly what is going to happen. We warned you. We warned your government, and you chose to ignore us. The Bedlar Housebass will no longer tolerate any nation interfering with the flow of trade across the known world. You can have your wars. She spit the word angrily, but reined herself back in again. You can have your wars, but any further attempt to blockade ports or support piracy against third parties will result in a formal declaration of war. Furthermore, the Delves will use every tool at our disposal, and there are many at our disposal, let me be candid, to ruin you. Those nations, I mean. We are Assaveia. You do not speak to us like this, spat the Assavean. Annika had to admire the ambassador's refusal to accept what she was being told. We were plying the seven seas when your ancestors were squatting by campfires and robbing tombs. Indeed, Annika interrupted her. Centuries ago the Assaveans bestrode the known world like a colossus. But what have you achieved recently? We will... Annika slammed her fist on the table, unconsciously pulling her thin lips back slightly to reveal her fangs. You will listen to what I am saying. You will make your plenum understand. We are not bluffing and we are not joking. We may not have been founded by demigods and ruled a third of the world, but please do not let our pleasant demeanour fool you. If you do not start taking us seriously, if you insist on underestimating us, if you remain on this destructive course you have charted, then we will show you what it means to be descended from tomb robbers who built an entire nation from ruins. And believe me, when I tell you we will eat you alive. Annika collapsed back into her chair, breathing heavily. The two women stared at each other for a moment. The Assavean's high colour a stark contrast to the Sarkophan's ivory-white skin. The ambassadrice stood slowly, her face blank. May I go now, Signora? Her voice was clipped, 2 bright red spots in her cheeks, the only sign of just how furious and humiliated she was. "Of course, madame. I shall have a copy of the formal document sent." But the Assaveyan was already gone, the door closing behind her. Annika let out a deep breath she had not realized she was holding, and stared into space for a long moment before adjusting her hair, straightening her desk, and preparing for her next appointment. The Imperial Secretary to Ambassador Dino would certainly be as punctual as ever. Overview. Each season, the Civil Service prepares a summary of the Empire's relationship with the foreign nations based on communications received from their ambassador, along with any useful intelligence gathered from other sources. While the Senate and the other houses of imperial power may respond to these offers, it is important to note that it is the appropriate ambassador that the foreign power will expect to hear from. Their communication with the foreign power is the primary element that will determine the tenor of any response. The merchant princes of the Sarkafan Delves, the Bedelar Hausbas, strive for neutrality. They are enthusiastic about trade with the Empire, but their neutrality is precious to them. They hold it a mark of pride that they will deal with anyone who has goods, services, or money. While they have given up the practice of slavery without regret, they refuse to pick a side between the Liberty Pact and the Freedom Accord. Their primary goal is to ensure the ports of the world remain open to their ships, ideally with free trade agreements that allow their merchants to operate without onerous tariffs. The Sarkafan ambassador to the Empire is Bedelar Hausbas Annika of the Tower of Crows. She reports to the beggar landlords of Sarkafan and is known to be a wily and subtle diplomat. No stranger to the murkier waters of espionage and intelligence gathering, she constantly seeks opportunities to expand the influence of the Sarkafan mercantile empire across the known world. She has no particular loyalty to one faction. Her main concern appears to be the prosperity of the nation as a whole. An ultimatum. The Sarkafan Delves approached the Imperial Ambassador about the creation of the Free Seas Pact 6 months ago. The Imperial Ambassador, concerned about potential conflicts with the Liberty Pact, was cautious and ultimately declined to become involved. The Sarkafan plan was to convince the Empire to join and then use that to put pressure on the Commonwealth and Sumar and eventually get everyone to agree to the pact. When the Empire equivocated, the plan fell apart. Without their endorsement, the other nations felt able to ignore the Delves. In the absence of Imperial support, the Sarkafan Delves have abandoned the communal approach and decided to act unilaterally. They have sent missives to every major nation, the Empire, Yarm, Asavea, the Commonwealth, and the Sumar Republic, and numerous small nations announcing the imposition of the Pax Sarkafan, a public commitment from the Delves that they will not tolerate piracy of merchant vessels of other nations. They will not permit any nation to threaten international trade. They have issued the Empire and every other nation with an ultimatum. Individual nations may do what they like to nations they are at war with. War is a harsh reality of the world and arguably good for business anyway. But the Delves will not permit anyone trying to prevent uninvolved nations from trading with those that they are at war with. Any attempt to do so by any nation will cause the Delves to declare war on them. The Delves may not have the largest or most powerful navy in the world, but they will cut off all trade with the nation and hire marines, mercenaries and pirates to harry their shipping across the 7 seas. Specifically, any nation that attempts to blockade ports against neutral parties, or employ bounties or other influence to encourage pirates and privateers to attack neutral trading ships, will find their own vessels targeted by Sarkafan captains. The Delves will also place bounties of their own on that nation's shipping, and unlike others, the Sarkafan have contacts with several groups who would be more than happy to take up such bounties on a professional scale. They would also bring their economic might to bear. While they prefer to remain neutral in trading matters, they would cut off all trade, imports and exports, with the target nation, and use every tool at their disposal to encourage other nations to do the same. For the Delves to wield political power in this fashion is unprecedented. But it is clear that the Beggar's Banquet is furious about the damage being done to international trade by the Assavean bounty on imperial ships and the recent blockade of the Sumar ports. They have no interest in interfering in war between nations, but they will not tolerate attempts to try and prevent nations that are not involved trading with either side of a conflict. It's not yet clear how the other great powers intend to respond to this extraordinary ultimatum by the Delves, but the Assavean plenum is furious for obvious reasons. Yet it appears they have also been left with little choice but to reconsider their current strategy of trying to block anyone from trading with the Empire. It perhaps helps the Sarkophan cause that the sheer cost of maintaining the bounty on ships visiting the Empire has become increasingly untenable for many of the plenum families. The Assaveans have a much stronger navy than the Delves, but the thought of being at war with the Empire, Sumar, and the Delves at the same time was too much, even for them. It seems the Delves might have successfully called their bluff. Not long after the Sarkophan announcement reaches the Empire, word begins to spread that the Assaveans have withdrawn their bounty on imperial ships. It will take a little while for the news to reach everyone, of course, but it is expected that foreign trade will begin to return to former levels and price increases will eventually settle back down again. The ultimatum delivered to the Empire is posted in the same strident terms that it is delivered to other ambassadors, but the Sarkophan are keen to point out that the Empire is a major beneficiary of this new arrangement. They are insisting everyone acknowledge the Pax Sarkophan as the new law of the Seven Seas, but they are clear that it is the Assaveans who have been forced to change their ways, and that the Empire need only sit back and enjoy the benefits. The Empire has ended slavery, they say, and everyone has benefited. Now it is time for the Delves to end the scourge of piracy, so that they too may contribute to a virtuous world. How the ambassador responds will be vital to determine what happens next. It's possible that the Delves are bluffing and that they won't really break off trade with the Empire if they refuse to accept the Pax Sarkophan. The Assaveans clearly thought they were serious enough not to risk that, but relations between Assavea and the Delves have been poor for some time. The ultimatum by the Delves is presented as a fait accompli, but the benefits they claim it offers seem real enough. Are those benefits worth accepting the authority of the Delves to impose their will on the Seven Seas in this way? Freed trade. The bounty on ships reaching the Empire has been withdrawn, but it will take a little while for this news to reach the pirates and privateers currently attacking merchant ships. It will take a few months for the prices charged by the Sarkophan ministries to return to normal, but it is anticipated that by the start of the autumn equinox, the many markets the Delves service in the Empire will have returned to their pre-bounty position, assuming this new Pax Sarkophan holds. This includes the ministries overseen by the Crudenkennan Trade Master, High Herbalist of Sibella, Master of the Root and Stem, Master of the Clearing House, Custodian of Iversgard Docks, and Custodian of the Concordium Dock, who all experienced an unfortunate 1/5 price increase due to Assavean interference. At the moment, the Delves are profiting from their relationship with the Empire. The profit margins might have narrowed a little, but they are still healthy. As the Imperial Ambassador points out, the Empire lets merchants from the Delves operate under a free trade agreement, and the Beggar's Feast would be loath to see that situation change. Ambassador Dino, however, has raised some questions about whether that situation will continue. The Beggar's Banquet has discussed the matter at length, and while they would prefer to continue benefiting from the agreement, they will understand if the Empire chooses to return them to a mercantilist position. They'd rather not see that happen, obviously, but they are pragmatic about the chances it will. It isn't a threat, but if the Senate chooses to move away from free trade, it will certainly impact Sarkophan enthusiasm for investing in the Empire. It won't stop it completely, but they are likely to focus their interests on the Alveti estate in Savos, rather than look for ways to trade with the wider Empire, at least in the short term. And as the Senate surely appreciates, the cost of tariffs is ultimately borne by the customer. The Apothecaries Guild. Bedlar Hausbaas Annika mentions that representatives of the Kreudenkenner have been in contact regarding news of the newly established Apothecaries Guild. As they understand it, the new guild has essentially assumed responsibility for trade in herbs, potions, and the like. There is some interest here in establishing common ground. If the new imperial sodality has the same kind of status as the Kreudenkenner do, as the premier dealers in herbs and potions in the delves, they may well be able to do business. One weakness of their current arrangements with the Empire is that their markets are scattered around and all need individual protection and such like. It might be possible to establish a more centralised market working with the Apothecaries Guild, or any number of other possibilities. As such, the Kreudenkenner have requested that Esme, speaker for the guild, consider sending a winged messenger to Bedlar Hausbaas Annika detailing the scope and desires of the guild and whether they think there is a benefit in a closer relationship with the Kreudenkenner. They're particularly interested in whether the guild would be prepared to cooperate on establishing a dedicated herbalist market in the Empire with the Sarkafan Delves. Schuyler and Holberg. During the winter solstice, Schuyler Koopman, a representative of the Lekever families, visited Anvil. After the summit, they accepted an open invitation from Holberg to visit the city and became enthusiastic about the potential to establish a Sarkafan trading enclave in the Northern Empire along the shores of the League. By all accounts, there has been a similar level of enthusiasm in the city, and also among the Sandfisher orcs of Misericorde. Schuyler proposed an appraisal to explore the best way to establish a port town, and the Senate initially proposed commissioning Naomi of Virtue's Rest to explore the possibility, but later changed their mind in favour of an exploration of lighthouses, which has since been delivered. There is obviously some disappointment among the port enthusiasts, but Koopman remains optimistic that there is still a possibility for a joint Sarkafan imperial effort in the Northern Empire. Schuyler Koopman himself has accepted an offer of hospitality from Bernard and Lula Kleist von Ennerlund, and has received cautious approval from the House of the Lekever to stay in the Empire a little longer. It's likely the industrious house is keen to recoup some of the losses they have apparently incurred in Axos by liquidating their interests in the docks at Issik. There has apparently been some discussion of draining the great pits of Ennerland. The Sarkafan have a great deal of experience working in marshy environments like the morass, that few in the known world can match, and none surpass. Rather than the Lekever, there is interest among some of the hyena families. While the hyena themselves are not especially composed of miners, they obviously have extensive contacts with Sarkafan engineers and diggers of all kinds. Schuyler is able to confirm that if the Imperial Senate are prepared to ask Naomi of Virtue's Rest to appraise the matter, there will be Sarkafan experts prepared to put themselves at her disposal. Of course, ideally, Koopman would prefer that happened after the matter of the port in Holberg is resolved. There are, of course, other ways to get an appraisal than via the Senate. It's possible that any such method could be used, and if it can be directed to work with Sarkafan, it will probably be just as effective as the prognosticator's office in finding an actionable way to approach either of these possibilities. Bedlar Hausbaas Annika is more philosophical about the matter. Every great nation has uncountable numbers of things they need to deal with at any given time. Also, she received a well-written explanation and apology from a citizen of the Brass Coast that laid out the reasoning for the change. Even had she minded to be irritated, the letter would have settled her temper. While the Lekever and the hyena are intrigued by possibilities in Holberg, the ambassador need not worry about a risk of offending the Delves. Business is business. If the port or the joint effort to drain the great pits of Ennerland go ahead, that will strengthen Sarkafan interest in the Empire and bring healthy profits to those involved. If they don't, there'll be plenty of other opportunities in the future, most likely. The Delves as a whole has little particular investment one way or another in what happens in Holberg. The coast is open for business. Ignacio y Uri y Erigo, the mistress of the Glass Parador, proposed a statement of principle during the spring equinox that proposed the Brass Coast would present a more amenable place to do business for the Croydon-Kenner than Savos. Let it be known, the coast is open for business. It's notable that Bedelaar Huisbaas Alema Vanderklee, who holds the seat of the Hyena, has already expressed interest in the possibility of investing in the coast. She is very interested in selling mithril and artisan metals to freeborn markets, but not until the immediate threat of the children of Rex is addressed. The Hyena are not especially concerned about the pirate ships. They have worked with the De Bruin before and see no problem doing so again. They are much more concerned about the spring magic that raises storms and floods and is almost impossible to adequately prepare for. Following Ignacio's statement, however, there has been a surge of interest in the possibilities of closer trade ties with the Delves. One of the advantages the Sarkafan enjoy in Savos is the establishment and concedence of the Alveti estates. Could the Brass Coast offer a similar opportunity to the Delves? There are plenty of Sarkafan houses, families and guilds who are eager to access not only the Brass Coast wealth of metals from Karaman, but also luxury goods such as Syrah, freeborn glass and fine cloth, rich spices and the like. The staff at the Sarkafan embassy have made a brief assessment of the situation and offered some advice to the freeborn assembly. Dealing with the children of Rex is unlikely to be something the Brass Coast could do on their own, but there may be other opportunities. The Delves have made it clear they're happy to cooperate with appraisals aimed at improving trade with the Empire. The Senate, or perhaps even Die Bertelung, could find ways to allay the concerns of the Hyena and encourage them to invest in the coast even with the threat of the children still ongoing. Alternatively, the Imperial Ambassador might be able to present a proposal to the Delves that is appealing enough the merchants involved either put aside their concerns about the children of Rex, or find the opportunity too good to miss, and so invest in their own methods of ensuring the servants of Siaka are not a problem. The Imperial Civil Service think this would be something of a long shot, however. It would need to be something truly appealing to the Sarkafan or one of the beggar landlords. The Archmage of Autumn might be able to secure assistance from one of the great cities of the Iron Labyrinth. Ephesus is an obvious possibility, as are Prospero and Calidus. The Civil Service posit that a suitably worded plenipotentiary might be easily as effective as an appraisal here, but it would need to be the only request made if the Archmage wanted to ensure it was picked. Finally, there is nothing to stop private citizens writing to Bedelaar Huisbaas Anneke about possibilities such as this. While the Sarkafan ambassador is likely disinterested in investing herself, part of her role involves briefing the rest of the beggar landlords about opportunities to increase their wealth. The civil service have no idea how effective this might be, as it depends on too many random factors, but the fact the Freeborn Assembly is behind the move might add additional weight. They also point out that there are other Sarkafan representatives in the Empire, several of whom are prepared to receive missives from Imperial citizens. Speaking of trade, currently there are 2 ports in the Delves available to Imperial merchant ships, Sarkafan itself and the luxurious port of Betovering. The latter remains reasonably popular with Imperial fleets, but there has been a marked decline in the number of vessels visiting Sarkafan itself. The Delves have noticed shifts amongst the goods offered to captains visiting other ports around the known world, with a growing emphasis on local luxuries or practical substances. At the moment, Sarkafan itself mostly offers herbs, beggar's lie and welt silver. Bedelaar Huisbaas Anneke has been tasked with asking the Imperial Ambassador for advice on the kinds of goods that might be appealing to Imperial traders. In the past, the Senate has been clear it does not favour the trade in recreational substances for the discerning customer. One reason Shedelhaven remains closed. Nor are they interested in Sarkafan apothecary such as might be acquired at the port of Moreskriden. While these 2 kinds of trade goods are something the Sarkafan have in abundance, they are by no means all they can offer. Indeed, the Delves trade with people all over the known world. It's literally impossible for Bedelaar Huisbaas Anneke to list everything the markets catering to Imperial fleet captains could provide. As such, She wishes to engage in some very basic assessments of the Empire's needs. Would the ambassador be prepared to canvass the merchants of the Empire and work out which of these broad categories of goods appeal to them? Luxury goods, primarily things that will sell well in the Empire for cash, or items designed for comfort or security. Crafting materials, ingots and measures, things of interest to artisans. Bulk herbs, the 5 magical herbs which the Delves have in abundance. Medicines, potions and items for treating injury and disease, or things useful to surgeons, physics and apothecaries. Recreational goods, drugs mostly. Martial goods, potions and other consumables that empower warriors and battle magicians, perhaps some magic weapons or armour. Magical goods, substances of use to ritual magicians, perhaps some magic items. Or victuals, a catch-all term for things people eat or drink that provide some sort of enhancement or ability in the right circumstances. If the ambassador could send Bedlar Housepass a list of these 10 items in order from most appealing to least appealing, she is prepared to offer a small payment of 5 thrones in recognition of the legwork involved. The list would be distributed to Sarkafan traders and serve as a basis for determining which kinds of goods and services to prioritise, both for trade to fleet captains and in opportunities appealing to the Empire over the next few years. More detail in areas such as preferred herbs or ideal materials would be helpful. Harnmark in bloom. Farms across Harnmark have spent the last few seasons giving over patches of their land to growing Vinderbloom for the Craft Brothers, self-styled entrepreneurs from the Sarkafan Delves who use the rare flower to make the narcotic Vizesmaak. The harvest has been good and business has been smooth, but this past season's pickers have begun to report something strange. Another plant appears to be growing alongside the Vlinderbloom, one they have not seen before. The flower is difficult to spot. It's a very similar shade of pink to Vlinderbloom, but its petals seem to spiral endlessly inwards. It's difficult to say when exactly it began to appear because the first few reports of it were discounted as imperfect batches of Vlinderbloom. The Craft Brothers have coined the name Drykolkbloom for the new flower, but seem just as clueless as Harnmark's farmers as to where it has come from and why it is growing amongst their commissioned plants. However, the brothers smell business and are keen for the farmers accidentally cultivating the flower to investigate whether it has any properties which would make it worth selling. A Sarkafan vintner holidaying at the Alveti estate is also curious about investing early. Renaten van Zuredruiven suspects that Drykolkbloom is similar enough in form to Vlinderbloom to be able to use it to brew Vizesmaak. They see the strange shape of the flower as simply further evidence of the rich terroir of the Harnmark earth, and believe it could be a great selling point for the Wintermark-grown narcotic. They have hot-footed it to Anvil and expect to arrive at the Tree of Names at 1 in the afternoon on Sunday, where they will be very happy to take Drykolkbloom off Imperial hands. They will use the blooms to brew a batch of Vizesmaak and return a dose each to everyone who offers a flower, for them to sample for themselves next season. They hasten to add that this is not a long-term business deal. They will make a loss on their experiments over the coming season, but they suspect that the knowledge gained will prove more than worth the coin sacrificed in the long run. As for how this strange flower has come to grow, there is no clear reason. Some point to the penumbral veil drawn across the territory these past seasons and wonder if the night magic has begun to leach into the very soil. Others say that it must be because Harnmark soil is much richer in ores and minerals than the parts of the Sarkafan Delves usually given over to cultivation of Vlinderbloom, and that the Drykolkbloom must need these extra nutrients to thrive. Still others point to the strange behaviour of animals in some areas of Wintermark lately, and wonder if the appearance of these plants is simply the flora responding just as the fauna already has been. The Art of the Tomb. During the spring equinox, Senna van Eyser, an art dealer associated with a small sect of the Sarkafan religion called Die Wurtzemelaars van Beltinissen, but usually referred to as the Collectors, spoke with the Council of Benefactors of Highguard. The collectors hold a belief esoteric even by Sarkophan religious standards, that valuable objects depicting a deceased person's face hold immense value for buying a place in the Houses of Silence. This visit followed on from a recent opportunity for Imperial priests to visit the estate of one of the Delves' most beloved celebrities, Elian Vlos, who is apparently themselves a collector. The upshot of all this attention is that imperial iconography and funerary monuments are now extremely fashionable among collectors, and even growing in popularity with Sarkophan folk with less bizarre understanding of the labyrinth. Senna apparently signed an exclusive deal for Highguard white granite and stonemasonry, organising the transport of pieces for the long journey to the Delves. The deal will last until the start of the spring equinox 388 YE, and during which all highborn businesses and mines receive an extra 18 rings production per season. Van Eyser apparently hopes that by the end of that year the reputation of Highguard stonemasons will be known internationally, with a little help from the Delves, and a better deal may be brokered. The deal was not without controversy, however. Misha van der Leibel is a priest of the way from Sarkophan, a dedicant of prosperity and a serious critic of the collectors. They believe the fascination with highborn art, iconography of the way, and their own faces captured in imperial white granite is entirely superficial. The collectors have never shown interest in the way itself, only the beauty of its imagery and its fashionable nature. Misha warned that signing Senna's deal ran the risk of devaluing the way, of making it all too easy for its followers to be denigrated as putting profit ahead of principle. It's unfortunate, but as news of the agreement spreads, this very much appears to be the case, especially in the Delves. Questions are being asked of the Highborn Assembly. Letters from concerned pilgrims of the way in Sarkophan, and from some worried citizens of Highguard, have been sent to both Nicodemus of Balthazar's Vineyard, the Speaker of the Highborn Assembly, and Keziah, the Bishop of the Navigators. It also seems that the Sumar Prasta are wasting no time pointing out that, in their opinion, the Highborn have sacrificed their pride for a few handfuls of coin. If nothing changes, the brunt of the problem will be met by the Bishop of the Navigators. The prestige of the cathedral will be significantly impacted. Both the merchant ministry and the low ministry permanently lose their top level of production each season that the deal with the collectors continues. That is, following the summer solstice, the ministry will lose the top level of each ministry, and if the deal runs its course, the low ministry will disappear entirely after the winter solstice, and the merchant ministry be reduced to a single level. The reputation of the cathedral will likewise be impacted significantly the longer the deal goes on. If the Highborn Assembly wishes, they may choose to enact a mandate, urging their people to stop trading with the collectors. While the pursuit of prosperity is virtuous, the collectors of Sarkophan have taken advantage of our Council of Benefactors. We send named priest to urge all those trading with the collectors to cease doing so already. Synod Mandate, Highborn National Assembly. If this mandate is enacted, and it requires no liao, the named priest will be empowered to speak with many of those dealing with the collectors and explain the problem. The trade will slow to a trickle and then stop. The benefit enjoyed by businesses and mines will be lost, and the damage to the Cathedral of the Navigators will likewise stop before it really gets started. Unfortunately, this cannot be seen as anything other than a criticism of the Council of Benefactors by the Highborn Assembly. Confidence in the Council will recover eventually, but the amount of wains of any kind that the Council can apply will be halved following the event the statement is upheld, recovering by 2 wains a season thereafter until it is restored to full. Dagon has provided the wording for an alternate mandate. The actions of the benefactors who met with Senna van Eyser of the Collectors do not represent the Council of Benefactors. We send named priests to urge all those trading with the Collectors to cease doing so, and encourage their benefactors to seek the wisdom of the Council before taking such offensive deals in the future. Synod Mandate, Highborn National Assembly. If this mandate is enacted, and it too requires no liao, then, much like the other mandate, the named priest will be empowered to speak with many of those dealing with the collectors and explain the problem. The trade will slow to a trickle and then stop. The benefit enjoyed by businesses and mines will be lost, and the damage to the Cathedral of the Navigators will likewise stop before it really gets started. The reduction in wains to the Council of Benefactors would also take effect, and would recover at the same rate. These two mandates are, unsurprisingly, competing. Beneath the Bay. As part of the discussion of Holberg, Schuyler Koopman and the Liekeve, the Imperial ambassador inquired about a possible Eternal under the Bay of Katazar. Bedlar Hausbas Annika is sceptical. Not about lighthouses. The Delves appreciate a good lighthouse, as does anyone at peril on the sea. Rather, the idea that an Eternal might be under the Bay of Katazar. Sarkophan magicians know well that Eternals cannot enter the material world, existing as they do in their own realms. They may be connected to the realm of mortals through Regio, but the idea of an Eternal physically in the world is impossible. Any theory that implies that is happening must therefore be wrong. There was also a query from Allegra y Riqueza, which clarifies the matter further. Apparently there is concern about an unknown Eternal of the Winter emerging to threaten the Empire. Reference to Kings of Nothing and Queens of the Void means little to the Bedlar Hausbas herself, but has apparently sparked some recognition among some of the more peculiar members of magical society in the Delves. There are plenty of Sarkophan magicians who have experience dealing with Eternals with an interest in the sea, or more realistically in concepts and resonances expressed through the metaphor of water and the ocean. Propitiating Maelstrom and trying to avoid her indiscriminate wrath, mostly, confesses the Sarkophan ambassador, with limited success. Trying to find ways to profit from the whimsical moods of the Regent of the Eternal Sea, hosting visitors from the city of Salt and Sail, and things of that nature. Each of the 6 realms has their own take on what the sea means, but personally, Bedlar Hausbas Annika finds most of them effectively useless. Too esoteric, dangerous, or just flat-out peculiar to be of value when compared to the kind of assistance that can be secured by the sovereign lords of the Iron Ocean. It's an interesting piece of trivia that some Sarkophan envision the Autumn Realm as a great ocean, with the cities built on islands, rather than the Iron Labyrinth favoured among Imperial magicians. Almost grudgingly, though, Annika confirms that there was some recognition from some of the magicians she mentioned. A dangerous Eternal of the Winter Realm tied to the sea, too. They refused to talk about it, however, and advised having nothing to do with it if at all possible. With the written equivalent of a sigh, then, the Sarkophan ambassador proposes that in the event the Imperial ambassador thinks any of this technical knowledge might be useful, she would be happy to host a visiting researcher from the Empire's Department of Historical Research. Doing so in the past has proved good for business, after all. The researcher would need to spend time talking to magicians, and so she estimates an overall cost to the Empire of 10 thrones. The research would take time. The civil service calculate it will need 6 months due to the distances involved. The assigned researcher would not be available until the work was complete, but would only count as a use of historical research for the summit where it was commissioned. There's no rush on this. The Sarkophan magicians are not going anywhere. The civil service point out that the value of this research will be heavily dependent on its scope. If there is a particular Eternal they are interested in, it might be best to ask about that, rather than a more general query about spirits of the sea. It's well known that Sarkophan magicians have their own particular areas of interest, just as imperial nations do. There's also a risk that what works in the Delves for dealing with Eternals will not automatically work for Imperial magicians. Caveat emptor, as they say in Old Assavean. And finally, several Sarkophan merchants visiting the Empire this season have become aware of a peculiar phenomenon in which strange black pearls are being found by captains traversing the Bay of Katazar. Some of these Sarkophan have themselves come into possession of them. By coincidence, A Sarkofan magician visiting the family at the Alveti estates was on board one of the ships who found one of these pearls, and on reaching the docks immediately issued an offer to the fleet captains of the Empire. It appears that the magicians of the Deepwater Spirit Weavers, a wealthy coven of Sarkofan dedicated to ship-based magics, will offer a Mask of the Seven Seas in return for 12 of these black pearls placed in an Ephesus box, along with a piece of parchment bearing a drawing of a ship's anchor. A Mask of the Seven Seas is a difficult-to-get-hold-of magical focus that apparently offers a small boost to the ability to perform any ritual that enchants a fleet, regardless of the school of magic to which it belongs. The mask will be delivered by the start of the autumn equinox. It is important, stresses the Deepwater Spirit Weaver, that only 12 pearls be placed in a given box. More than that, and the Coven will be unable to take ownership of these minor trinkets, and thus will not deliver the mask. The magician refuses to go into detail, but suggests that if more than 12 are placed in a single Ephesus box, there is a serious risk that the pearls will simply be lost, or worse. Out of character note, anyone who takes advantage of this offer will still need to meet with the Heralds of Ephesus on Sunday morning to confirm who will receive the mask. The ribbon will go into the character's inventory. An ideal physrep for such a mask is a white or gold half-face mask with an anchor on the forehead, but with one of the eye sockets sealed or covered in gauze. It apparently represents the Mariner, a dramaturgic persona used to perform magic that strengthens or supports, or that acquires practical information.